Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week we're doing something special as artist Jen Bartel joins the show for a deep dive conversation about the ins and outs of getting started as an artist through the prism of her experience. Jen, are you ready to make this happen?
Yes, let's do it. It's good to be back, David.
It's what? Oh, it's good to be back. I thought you said it was good to be bad, and I was like, this is a very weird start to this conversation. Well, I want to start with a little preamble because, you and I started emailing back and forth about this idea. You wanted to do something basically a, quote unquote, getting started as an artist 101 because, you get questions, you get a lot of questions and and a lot of people don't exactly know what being an artist in comics or just generally is like. What made this something you wanted to do?
There was a period of time where I was able to kind of keep on top of answering all of my emails and answering all of the questions that I get on social media. And, it was kind of manageable. And now it's sort of reached a point where I know I'm missing stuff. I know that I can't respond to everybody. And so I thought it would be really great to kind of do just a comprehensive, really deep dive into everything. And I also just really love your podcast. And so I was kind of looking for an excuse to edge my way back on.
Well, thank you. No, I mean, first off, you're always welcome. But second off, and it also fits my audience because like a lot of people are interested in making comics. And that's the thing too, is like, I think a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about, while like the art specific stuff wouldn't translate, I do think some of this stuff, these questions we're going to be answering to a certain degree, kind of work across comics to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll be interesting. But I do think one of the things, when we originally talked, and we're just for listeners that don't know, we're going to be kind of going from like the beginning of where you started as an artist to, being a successful artist, a working artist, and what all that looks like. But one of the things we talked about the first time when you were on is, your college experience, whether or not that's worthwhile. Our art school experience. And I think that's an interesting thing because I talk to a lot of artists and their experience when they go to, varying art schools is they don't learn a lot about the business side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a really difficult thing because you go in, you know how to make the art, but you don't know how to actually successfully monetize and make a living out of all that. And that's complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. And, I feel like every month or month and a half, there's this topic gets revived and, you see it going around Twitter, like, is art school worth it? And it's so hard because it's such a case by case situation. And, I will say that, frankly, I don't really feel qualified to tell prospective students today whether or not it's worth the tuition cost because the cost of tuition at SVA, even the school that I went to, is basically double what it was when I went.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane. And it was crazy when I went, but now it's like it's twice as expensive. And it feels like anyone who went to school back when I did isn't even properly equipped to answer that question anymore because it's a completely different ball game,
Right.
And I do think that at a certain point, things are going to come to a head and these prospective students are going to have to stop going to traditional art schools because it's just becoming so unaffordable. And I think also from like a, societal standpoint, we need to look at what that means and what kinds of kids from what kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds get to go to art school, So yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings about it, but I guess any education is better than no education, I
Sure.
would say. So, I think that's undeniable. It's not really up for debate. If you have the means and the drive to go to art school, then do it, I think that there are always some people who are ready to offer the hot takes about how you don't have to go to art school anymore. You can learn everything you need to know on the internet, et cetera. But, there's a lot of people out there who aren't as self-motivated who could really benefit from the structure and also just from the community aspect of going. So I won't knock it, but I also just think that financially it's unobtainable for most people. And we as an industry kind of have to recognize that too. As far as my own personal experience in art school, it's funny because I was never like, a star student or anything. I kind of fumbled my way through school and I was a little bit aimless. And I think I had a lot of teachers who doubted me, and I had a lot of peers who probably never would have expected that of my graduating class, I would be one of the successful ones.
Hmm.
But, that's because a lot of my learning took place after school. And the one thing that I do have to credit SVA with is that even if I didn't learn everything there, I learned how to learn when I was
Hmm.
there. And so, yeah, was that worth the tuition cost? I don't know, because I didn't take a different path. But yeah, it's such a hard conversation, and everyone is going to offer their own opinion, but really it just boils down to what is your financial situation like, and how driven are you? You
Yeah.
know?
This is a really tough question, but I'm curious about whether or not art school plays a part in the way that a typical degree would. Like, have you ever had somebody like look at your resume and be like, I want to hire her because she went to SVA? Is that a thing that happens for artists?
Absolutely not. I think that when I was, maybe a little bit more for in-house jobs.
Sure.
Yeah, when I was applying for like in-house design positions, it was something that a lot of offices were interested in, but I don't think it was a deciding factor.
Hmm.
And certainly once I went freelance, not a one single person or client has ever asked me about my degree.
Yeah, that would be kind of hilarious if Marvel was like looking through resumes. It was like, it says here you went to SVA.
Show us proof.
We might hire you for this Black Panther issue. Okay, we're convinced now. And you're like, well, that's weird.
Right,
Yeah, that
right. I
seems
know.
unlikely.
No, it's just not a thing that happens. So, there are a lot of reasons to consider it, but it is not a requirement.
Well, and I guess like this is something to underline right in the beginning. You know, everything that we're going to talk about is obviously from Jen's perspective, but at the same time, it's like I think a big thing for no matter what you're doing in comics, or really no matter what you're doing in life, is like there might be different answers for every person, and it's like
Mhm.
there's no universal answer. All there is like you can kind of provide some guidance and work from there.
Yep. And I'm glad you said that because I think so many people are very quick to offer advice online. And, for a lot of us, it's because we get asked so much.
Hmm.
So it feels like we're just trying to help. But sometimes, I just wish people would remember that they need to kind of take everything with a grain of salt and really just apply what makes sense for them.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your art yourself and like developing your art. I know after SVA, you took a bit of a circuitous path to finding your voice and style. We talked before we started recording about how you worked at an Apple store and like how that was something you were doing before you actually became a working artist. Like, let's dig into that. What was your story in figuring out your voice and style, and what advice do you have for those looking to figure that out for themselves?
Yeah, I feel like other than the art school question, the style question is like the other really like big can of worms.
Right, right.
But yeah, it's funny because when I was in school, we had all of these like visiting guests come in every now and then, right? And we would have like people who had graduated from the school, and the one common thing that all of them would say is, it's going to take you at least 5 years after you graduate to really get your footing.
Yeah.
And when you're like 19 years old, you're like, yeah, right, you're old. It's going to take you 5 years. Like 5 years is forever. It's an eternity. Like you're telling me that I'm doing 4 years of school and then I'm going to have to do another 5 years of figuring things out after that? You're joking.
It's kind of like a doctorate program.
Yeah, yeah. A very expensive with less payout and more self-motivated doctorate program. But yeah, like that was the thing that all of them said, and I didn't believe them. And it took me not 5 years, but 6 years after graduating
Hmm.
to start finding my footing. And in that time, I worked a ton of retail jobs, service industry jobs, and finally, I managed to land an in-house product development job where I did everything from product design to packaging design. And yeah, I did a lot of like very unglamorous stuff. And while I was doing it, I was like, this sucks. It's pointless. It has, why did I go to school so that I could like work at Apple, you know?
Yeah.
Because the other thing too is I was working at the time in a position that I don't think they have anymore, but it was called creative, and there was nothing creative about it. You were basically just like showing people how to use iPhoto and like, fixing their iPhone problems. And yeah, I just remember at the time thinking like, oh my God, I went to 4 years of art school and I'm teaching people how to use iPhoto.
Yeah.
Like what happened? And you feel like a giant failure, but it was during that time that I started to gain a lot of the soft skills that I use every day in my freelance career. And it was also the period of time where I started gaining enough life experience to start figuring out who I was and what my voice was,
Hmm.
And I think finding a style is so hard for so many students because they don't have as much perspective. Because you can really kind of only gain that perspective by living some life.
Hmm.
And I sound like such an old, I'm that person that's like going to your school and telling you that it's going to take 5 years. Um,
The
but
student has become the teacher.
yeah, it's come full circle. But it really is true. And I think when it comes to visual art, style is really just it's a culmination of your personal taste. And in order to develop taste, you just have to consume as much as you possibly can. And so, I think within our industry, and particularly like when you're just starting out, it's really easy to feel guilty about not drawing enough, right? Especially with like how, analytics and like numbers driven social media can be.
Hmm.
Whenever I see people on my timeline all the time, they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry I haven't posted in the last 3 days, you guys."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh my God," like we are all conditioned to feel like we have to be art machines, constantly like pumping out new content for people to freely consume. But part of the job is consuming ourselves, So that's playing games, that's watching movies and anime and other things. It's reading comics, which is like a thing that most comic artists don't have time for.
Right.
It's all of these guilty pleasures that we shouldn't feel guilty about because that is what helps us develop our taste. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess that would be my number one advice to people who are trying to figure out what their voice is to watch and read and live a lot of life, and really distill down, what it is that you like, and then figure out how to apply that to your own work.
Did you have any like when you were taking that time to kind of figure out your voice, did you have any like formalized process, or was it all just like I'm going to draw as much as I can after consuming all this stuff, and it eventually just turned into what you are?
Yeah, so it was kind of a two-parter for me. When I was in the first like 4 years after graduating, and I was working a lot of retail jobs and, just menial, whatever, things that I didn't think really applied to me or my chosen career path. I was not super structured about it. And at the time, I was like trying to be a freelance artist. And
Hmm.
so whenever someone offered me a job, I would say yes to it, even if it wasn't exactly in line with what I liked, or even if I didn't think that I would, have a good time doing it. I just felt this obligation to say yes because it was work and because, back then the work was so sparse
It could be your
that
foot in the door.
right. So I was like, I got to say yes to this. And I ended up doing a lot of weird, bad jobs that I would be deeply ashamed to show in my portfolio. And so finally, after like 4 years of kind of just spinning my wheels and, doing, I did like weird children's book stuff that nobody should ever see. It's very bad.
Somebody's going to find that now. I apologize in advance.
It's terrible. And I think there are a lot of college grads that end up doing that too, because a lot of these smaller companies specifically target college students and recent grads because the pay is so terrible.
Right.
And they know they can get us when we're just graduated and desperate. So anyway, after I had done, kind of these crappy freelance jobs for 4 years, that was when I decided, okay, I'm not going to be a freelance artist. It's just not in the cards for me. I'm a failure. I'm going to get an in-house job. That way, at least I will be doing something that is art related, and I won't feel like I'll just be a forever retail employee. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just felt so far removed from what I had set out to do that it made me feel like a failure. I'm not saying that people who work retail are failures. Absolutely not. But for me personally, it was a tough pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened is after 4 years of basically no structure and saying yes to all of these jobs that I shouldn't have, I managed to get this in-house product development job. And I told myself, okay, you are now working in-house. You're doing art 9 to 5. It's not the art that you wanted to do, but it's something. And what that means is that you are making a stable income off of art.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to take freelance jobs anymore, and you can just go back to drawing for fun. Because I, at that point, didn't even remember what drawing for fun was.
Yeah.
And so what had happened is I did a total 180, and I said, okay, anything that I do outside of the office job now is just for fun. That's just for me. And so that was when I started giving myself permission to just like lean further into the things I liked. And I think that's actually when my like quote unquote style started to emerge,
Yeah.
And it all kind of happened organically. And yeah, the first year that I was like trying to do that, I think I did a total of 4 pieces that year. It was, yeah, I gave myself permission to just take a break,
Yeah.
And I needed it badly. And so that's the other thing is I see a lot of people online talking about how they're not productive enough or they feel guilty because they're not posting enough or whatever. And you have to listen to what your brain and your body are telling you. And I think the best thing that I ever did for myself was allow myself time off.
Mm-hmm.
Because then the following year, I kind of hit the ground running and I said, okay, I know what I like now. I'm going to set out with the goal of doing 2 illustrations a month. Which also, I mean, it seems absurd because now I'll do 2 illustrations. I mean, I'll do more than 2 illustrations a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, my very modest goal was to do 2 illustrations a month, and I didn't always hit it. Sometimes I only did 1. But that was okay. And yeah, once I started doing that is when clients took note, and that is when I started getting hired. So
yeah. Well, I do want to touch on the day job part of all this, because I think sometimes people feel like as if you're not doing currently what you think you should be doing, whether or not that's an artist or something else, like you can feel like a failure. But I mean, just for a quick anecdote, like Nate Silver is the guy who runs the 538, which is a really successful like political and sports website.
mm-hmm.
And he started doing, when he started his career, he was doing like a nowhere marketing job. And during that process, he created a like predictive model for baseball statistics called Pacoda. And like, that was because he had free time that was allowed to him because his nothing marketing job was really easy for him. And that led him to where he wanted to be. And it's like, yeah, sure, it may not be the glamour that you want for yourself or like even like the field you want for yourself. But if it affords you the time to find the answers that you need for yourself, then it's worthwhile.
Yes. I think that the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? Not bargaining chip. The biggest, like the best negotiating power you can give yourself as a creative person is the ability to say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you have a steady day job, that gives you so much more negotiating power than somebody who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're already making enough of an income, hopefully, to be stable enough to say no. So that way you can be way more selective about the kinds of jobs that you do take on in your free time. And those jobs can be catered specifically to growing your own portfolio. And they can actually be work that you want to show to people as opposed to doing what I did for 4 years and making a bunch of work that you put away in a vault that hopefully no one ever discovers. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's so much value in working a day job, and it's insane how people who, you know, honestly are the strongest of all of us because
Right.
they're working an insane amount. They're doing a full-time job, and then on top of that, they're doing passion projects. Feel so much shame about it.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, like I'm in that position. The good news is I'm completely
Yeah.
shameless, so it works out for me. Let's talk a little bit about how you actually apply that style because, I mean, a lot of times people feel like the tools are what define you. It's just like, oh, as long as I have that, that tablet to work off of, then I will be the greatest artist in all of comics. That's not necessarily the case, but for you, like, in a broader sense, like what tools and resources would you say are kind of like industry standard for comic artists, and like what do you use? And I actually, to add an addendum to that, how has that evolved?
Yeah, so it's funny. Every time I post like a drawing video, sometimes I post these little short clips of me like inking something or whatever. Um, the two comments that I get the most frequently are, "Oh, I really need to get a Cintiq,"
Right.
and "What brush is that?" And the thing is, it's funny because there are a lot of artists online who will say that tools don't matter, that what brush is that is a stupid question, and I've never understood it because you get a room full of artists together, and the first thing we're all asking each other is like, "Oh, what are you using? What are you drawing with?" You
I just
know?
imagine it's a lot of Kyle Webster being thrown around.
It is. But it's funny because like a couple of years ago, I was hanging out with Chris Anka and Jake Wyatt and Kevin Wada, and we were all sitting at this table drawing, and all of us were like, "Oh, what pen is that? Oh,
Hmm.
what watercolors are you using, Kevin?" And it's like tools absolutely matter. And anyone who says that they don't is just like kidding themselves because yeah, like if you're a base level beginner artist, sure. Like getting a Cintiq is not going to suddenly make you a brilliant artist who has like technical skills to rival a working professional, but it will make your life a little easier,
Yeah.
and it might make your path to getting there a little shorter.
Hmm.
And I think that we shouldn't be in denial of that. But I will say that like any creative field, it's a huge investment. A lot of these tools are professional grade. They're very expensive. And it's not unlike buying, a professional grade musical instrument or, like if you want to be a professional cyclist, right?
Right.
You have to get a nice bicycle. It's similar to that. And so I think industry standard has always been, I know it's technically pronounced Wacom, but I just like I can't say it that way. I don't know. I've always said Wacom. I'm just gonna do it. I'm sorry if it annoys people on the podcast.
I always said
Um,
Reese's peanut butter cups, and then I found out I was wrong, and
yeah.
I was like, "Well, you're wrong," so I'm gonna keep saying it that way.
Wait, is it Reese's?
It's Reese's, yeah.
Ugh,
So it's like Reese's
no, that's wrong.
Pieces. Yeah, it feels wrong. I've always said Reese's. Anyways,
Agreed. But
so
yeah, so I
Wacom.
think yeah, industry standard has always been Wacom. But I am happy to see that there are some pretty big competitors coming out of the woodwork over the past couple of years, because I think that they've largely held a monopoly over the digital art realm,
Sure.
and it's kind of made them. I mean, their products have always been good, but I think a healthy competition for companies like that is always a good thing when it comes to driving innovation and also hopefully getting lower prices on things. So yeah, what I use is a standard 22-inch Cintiq. It is their like mid-range model actually, and it's funny because every time I post a drawing video, people are like, "Oh my God, do you have the 32-inch Cintiq, whatever?" Because it looks massive.
Hmm.
But it's just because it's like zoomed in on video. It's it's a big screen, don't get me wrong, but they make two other sizes that are bigger than what I have.
Yeah.
And I don't know how necessary those are for comic art, but they're probably very nice. I also do everything in Adobe Photoshop, which has also largely been industry standard for a very long time. But I think that Clip Studio Paint is really giving them a run for their money now.
Hmm.
That application is kind of amazing. And I was kind of opposed to it because I just couldn't get a hang of like, the design of the program. But the more I use it, the more I'm like, oh, I can see how people do everything start to finish in this thing.
Hmm.
And so I've definitely been kind of dabbling in it a little bit more lately, but it's very nice. The whole reason why I started using Clip Studio Paint a little bit more is because I occasionally will draw on my iPad Pro. It's not too often, but I try to travel with it. And so if I have to work on the road, I will do things on it occasionally. And Clip Studio Paint, in my opinion, is the best pro grade application for the iPad. So my at home setup is Photoshop and the Cintiq, and my mobile setup is the iPad and Clip Studio Paint.
Hmm.
And when I'm working in Photoshop, I use all of Kyle's brushes. Kyle T. Webster is an illustrator who, God, 6 years ago,
He,
5 years
he's
ago?
he's every artist's favorite person in
Yeah,
reality.
yeah. I don't know how long ago or how long it's been, but he created these custom, Photoshop brushes. And it just grew into this like crazy thing where he essentially changed the face of digital art because, I mean, before Kyle made those brushes, like it was so much harder to get digital art to look closer to traditional media, you know?
Hmm.
And he's just, yeah, I think now he's like officially partnered with Adobe and like Kyle brushes basically come with Photoshop now,
Yeah.
which is awesome. But yeah, I think that his brushes are standard for a reason. They're pretty great. I have seen some things recently about Adobe like changing, you know, uh, subscription plans and things like that I'm not too happy about, but I haven't had a chance to like read into it yet, so I don't know what's happening with that.
There was an article going around today that said that Adobe tells users they can get sued for using old versions of Photoshop, which is,
Oh,
not great.
on Adobe.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, and that's really tough because it's like not everybody can always upgrade everything. But um,
Yeah.
I do want to, I do want to touch on one thing because, this is another one of the situations where it's like not everyone's going to do things exactly like you. Do you think, some people work traditionally or, actually, I guess everybody kind of works a blend of traditional digital at this point.
Hmm.
Do you think that there's any one right answer for an artist, or do you think it's just find out what works best for you?
Oh God, no. There's no right answer. There's no one answer that's going to apply to everyone. And actually, real quick, because I do get asked about traditional media too.
Yeah.
I just want to say the number one thing if you want to work traditionally is to just make sure that you are working with archival materials. There are a lot of papers out there that have certain levels of acidity that will fade your drawings over time, as opposed to keeping them on the paper.
Hmm.
And there are also lots of inks and things like that that will fade over time. So yeah, if you're looking to get into doing traditional work, just make sure that you're always working archival, and especially if you're planning to sell those pieces. Like if you go through all the labor of inking a elaborate cover and someone wants to buy it off of you and you sell it to them and 8 years later it's like yellow and faded, that's not a super good look. So just archival materials and you know traditional tools are really, it really just boils down to like trying things out and getting a feel for what you like the best. But if people want to know what I use, I tend to ink on Reeves BFK printmaking paper. I also really like Stonehenge papers. They make a really nice, like slightly textured, like cotton rag and a vellum. I like my papers to be a little bit toothy because I make a lot of fine lines. So if you're working on a really smooth, like hot press paper, you're going to end up with thicker lines unless you have a lot of control, because that paper will just it will show every stroke very
Hmm.
clearly. But if you work on a paper that's a little toothier, not each one of the bristles in your ink brush is not necessarily going to cling to the paper the way it would if it was smooth. So you'll have an easier time making thin lines like I do. And I also really, really like Pentel brush pens. They are the best, the most convenient, the thinnest tips. I use them religiously. So, yes, I just wanted to talk about that real quick because
No,
I'm
no, no.
like, everybody asks me what I use. If I ever post like a drawing video, I just can't keep up with it. So now I'm just going to tell people, go listen to this podcast.
Oh man, I honestly like I get questions about how like what do I use for writing, and I'm just like Microsoft Word and the power of prayer. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have
Yeah.
to imagine you get a lot more questions about that. Yo, everybody! I want to take a second to talk about my friends at TKO Studios. TKO Studios is a new comic publisher that launched with what the New York Times calls an impressive slate of talent. They publish books by top creators, including Roxane Gay, Jeff Lemire, Garth Ennis, Gabriel Walta, and many more. TKO also does things differently than other publishers. They binge release their books and offer each title in whatever format you most enjoy reading your comics in, whether that's a 6-issue set in a collector's box, trade paperback, or digital download. I'm a single issues guy, so I went that route and I love the collector's box. Even better, all of TKO's first issues are free to read at tkopresents.com right now. So if you're curious, visit tkopresents.com to give them a try or follow at TKO Presents across all social platforms. And if you're a store that's interested in stocking TKO's books, email retailers at tkopresents.com to learn more about one of the best retailer deals in the industry. And now, back to the show. I do want to talk about sequentials really quick in a broader sense. Mostly because, I think a lot of people, you came in as a cover artist, you still do a lot of covers, you do a lot of like just, illustration work still, even though you're doing Blackbird and have done other projects in terms of sequentials. How important do you think it is to have sequentials in your portfolio if you are somebody who's trying to work in comics? Or do you think that answer really depends on what kind of art you want to do in comics?
Yeah. It super depends. I absolutely did not want to do interiors. um, I think even when I was first starting out, I knew that it was just like so much work.
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to be an interior artist. I did not see myself doing it. I somehow got convinced to do it, begrudgingly. And now I'm here, and now I have Stockholm syndrome, and it is what it is. But no, when I was first starting out, I did not have sequential samples because I did not set out to be a comic artist.
Right.
And that I think is exceedingly rare, because most of the time, if you are being hired to do sequential art, it's because you've proven that you're capable of doing sequential art.
Right.
I think within comics, illustration, like visual arts in general, there is no like job interview, right? If you're a freelancer, you have your portfolio, and that is what tells potential clients whether or not you're capable of doing the work.
Right.
And so if you want to be a comic artist, you have to have comic pages. Unless somebody is determined to turn you into a comic artist against your will, which is what happened to me. But that's not the kind of advice that I would give to people who actually want and are seeking it out,
Was
and
that
yeah,
person Sam Humphries?
No, actually it was Kelly Thompson.
Oh.
Yeah. She was the very first writer that I ever worked with.
Yeah, on Gem, right?
Yes. Yeah. It was Kelly Thompson and John Barber, and they were like, you should draw some Gem interiors. But it was also like, I say that it's a rare situation, but I mean, so much of this industry is like your opportunities are kind of decided by your relationship building, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had already done so many covers for them that like they knew me pretty well. And I think that they knew certain things about me, and they knew what I was capable of, just from working with me on the other stuff that it wasn't as big of a risk to ask me to do like, 4 pages of something.
Right.
And so I guess in that sense, like you could get your foot in the door that way. But again, it's like, I don't know how easy it would be to replicate that or like how that would go for someone who really, really does want to be a storyteller and do sequential art, you
Yeah.
know?
It seems to me that it's like your portfolio should almost like dictate what you envision for yourself in terms of what you want from comics. It's like if you want to be a
Yes.
sequential artist, you should develop a portfolio that reflects that. If you want to be a cover artist, having, kind of cover pinup type samples is a good direction to have in terms of how you represent yourself on your portfolio. So it seems like defined by your desired role almost.
For sure. And it's so funny that like I think a lot of people don't fully realize that. They're like, well, why am I not being hired? And it's because you have to prove that you can do the work. And sometimes that means that you work for free for a little bit for yourself. Basically, you are your own client, hiring yourself to do covers or interior pages. And, they can be fake, but you make them look like the real thing and you will convince people that they are the real thing. So yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. There are a lot of even people like wanting to be cover artists,
Hmm.
who don't really have anything in their portfolio that looks like a cover.
Right.
Like they have, some nice pinups and like some, nice like floating portraits, but they don't really have anything that like sells me that they can do a cover.
So really quick, for the people out there who kind of associate, pinups with covers, what is the difference to you? Like, what is the difference between like those things that you're talking about and like cover work that you think that publishers might hire somebody for, I guess?
Yeah. So, you know, to me, and maybe this isn't like the standard definition of a pinup, but to me, a pinup is like a character illustration, right? So, oftentimes when I think of a pinup, it's like, well, this is just like a character on a blank background, or, it's maybe like a bust shot or something. It's basically character art.
Mm-hmm.
And a cover can be that, but it can also be so many other things. Like there are so many different ways to do cover art, whether it's more like design oriented or whether you're doing more of like a narrative illustration. But bottom line is if you're a cover artist, you are essentially like designing the packaging of the book,
Yeah, it's product
right?
design.
Yeah, like in a sense, you are designing the thing that's supposed to sell it.
Yeah,
So if you aren't thinking about it in those terms, like you aren't going to be super useful to the client.
yeah,
And I think that when young artists are building their portfolios, they really need to consider like, why would someone want to hire you? Why do certain artists get hired for things? And ultimately, it's because they are problem solvers and they are making the editors or the art director's job easier.
mm-hmm.
So, like, I think that a lot of them look at, being a cover artist like it's this glamorous, like, rock star type of thing where, oh, you get to just like draw characters all the time and that's so fun. But more than anything, it's problem solving.
Yeah,
And it's packaging.
right.
Like, you have to make an image that will sell a book. Yeah, and I think when a lot of young artists are getting into it and figuring out what they want to do, a lot of them, I think that being a cover artist might look desirable because it looks easy.
Mm-hmm.
And in so many ways, it is way easier than doing sequentials. I will not deny that, especially from a labor standpoint. But there's also a lot riding on it. And, you kind of have to prove that you're capable of thinking in those terms.
It's also like a considerably different gear than like as somebody who's doing sequentials. It's like a person can do sequentials and not necessarily be a good cover artist, and a person can be a good cover artist and not necessarily be good at sequentials. And
Yes.
that's a really that's an interesting thing that I think people forget about sometimes. I do want to say about cover artists, I think one of the interesting thing about cover artists is that when I talk to like retailers or people who are, like if you look at like a speculator market, even it's like cover artists are in some ways like a different level of star in
Hmm.
a lot of ways than like interior artists are. It's like people like Art Germ is extremely famous. And then like in a
Yeah.
way that I think that like some sequential and he like impacts sales in a way that
Yes.
a lot of interior artists don't even, which is amazing because the vast majority of what you are buying is interiors.
Yes.
But it is interesting, and I think that that might be part of the reason why cover art is more attractive to some. It's like it has like a little bit more sizzle to it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because I think from the outside perspective, the cover artists look like like it looks like a very desirable position. And it is, there's a lot of really great things about being a cover artist, but from the standpoint of like sustainability and long-term career success, you're much better off being an interior artist because you'll make royalties on your book.
Right.
You'll have, steady long-term work. There are so many cover artists out there who aren't as in demand as Stanley is, or as like J. Scott Campbell or any of these like regular cover artists that retailers love. And they might do like one cover a month,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe no covers a month, or maybe one month they do five and the next month they do none,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you are the regular artist on a book, you've got paychecks coming in all year round,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because the people who are outside of the industry are like, oh, cover artists, like that's the best gig. But inside the industry, everybody knows that like if you want actual steady, sustainable income,
Yeah.
cover art is not usually it. And so I think it just kind of boils down to what your priorities are. And that being said, there are a lot of other avenues to potentially, make income. And there are a lot of ways that successful cover artists have monetized their covers and managed to stretch the income that they make off of, individual covers, whether that's by selling the original art or selling licensed prints of it or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case is. But bottom line is it's not as steady and it's not as predictable. And a lot of it is sort of determined by how well you can sell,
Yeah.
which is a little bit scarier to navigate, I think.
Yeah. Well, I know this is kind of a funny place to jump into, given the fact that we're talking about how it's like not as desirable in some ways as interior art, but I know that a lot of people have interest in there in that. I know you get that question a lot, like how do you become a cover artist? Do you think there's a path to getting cover work that's different than the one for interior artists? I know that there's not really one path, but is there something there that could help you be more desirable in that realm and as you're trying to figure out how to do that?
Yeah. You know, so definitely what we talked about in terms of like structuring your portfolio,
Yeah.
and understanding that like being a good cover artist is not necessarily about being like the most technically inclined. It's first and foremost about being a good designer, I think. Because like a huge commonality between all of the top tier, regular cover artists that you see in comic shops is that they have a very, very marketable style and voice. And they all look different, but the commonality is that when they do a cover, retailers have an easier time selling those covers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just kind of knowing what is appealing about your art and leaning into that as much as you can, I think is the important thing. And I'm not saying to lean into what's appealing about someone else's art, but what's appealing about yours.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, I mean, like if I was structuring a portfolio in hopes of, becoming a cover artist today, I would be looking at doing sort of like poster style art
Mm-hmm.
over standalone like pinup illustrations. And again, it's like I'm not sure that pinup is necessarily the right word, but I wouldn't just draw like characters on blank backgrounds,
Right.
you know?
Well, it is
Because
storytelling.
yeah, I mean, it's the difference between like sequential storytelling versus like a singular narrative illustration,
Mm-hmm.
right? or you're making a non-narrative sort of, I call them like evergreen covers. They're kind of the more iconic, like poster looking covers.
Hmm.
And to me, that's like 90% design.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think that technical drawing skills are secondary to being able to like create an iconic or, you know, eye-catching image that is going to be easy to sell to people.
Hmm.
But also, I mean, part of why some of these covers sell is because there is a speculator aspect to it, right? Like
Totally.
we're kind of like making the Babies of comics, where once an artist sort of starts getting a reputation for being a good seller, then all of a sudden you have all these collectors that are like, oh, well, do I need to start getting those so I can hold on to them?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, when it comes to that, I think I hate to say it, but a huge part of it is having an engaged audience on social media, you know?
Yeah.
Um, it sucks. Nobody likes that that's a part of the job because we all just got into it because we just want to draw pictures, you know?
Hmm.
And I know that there are like tons of old guard people who are like, rah, nah, screw Twitter. It's not important. And maybe for them, because they're already established or because they managed to break in at a time where it wasn't necessary,
Hmm.
they can say that. But I think, yeah, it's if you can command, enough of a following online that an editor who wants to hire you can take a hard number, a quantifiable number, to some dude who's wearing a suit upstairs and tell them like, hey, this artist has value because look how many people are following them.
Right. Right.
Look what their engagement is like. I want to hire this person. Please let me hire them. Right? Because even like the editorial staff has to jump through hoops to hire new people. So I think it sucks because I don't want to boil down people's worth to just like a follower count. That's so stupid. But it is one of the few quantifiable numbers that can be put in front of the dude in the suit,
Yeah.
and it is a part of getting hired to do like more high profile stuff for sure.
Well, and this is a different beast, but look at Daniel Warren Johnson. Whenever one of his
Yep.
commissions drops on Twitter, and
My
like
God.
it's not even just Daniel. I mean, like Daniel is like the most modest guy on the planet, but
Yeah.
when his art dealer Felix Liu posts it, it is an event. It's just like they're like, look at this new thing, and everyone's like, oh my god, my mind is blown. But
Yep.
I guarantee you that makes it a little bit more difficult to get a commission from him, and then on top of that, it makes it a little bit more expensive to get it every time.
A
And
lot of it.
yeah, exactly. And like that's important, and it's it does a number of things. One, it makes it more quantifiable that you're desirable, but also it's just like it's getting you in front of more eyes and everything like that. So it's really
Yes.
potent.
Yeah.
Let's talk about social. I want to go. I want to talk about that before we jump into one more thing involving portfolio. But
Hmm.
it's 2019. Conventions are still important. And we'll talk about conventions here more in a second. But, a person's online presence is essential to breaking into comics for the most part. That's not to say you can't, break in without having a social presence or without having a successful social presence. But it helps considerably. How important do you believe social media is as a tool for, getting discovered and also getting work in comics?
It's again, it's sort of like the thing that I don't want to tell people and they don't want to hear because it somebody's success on social media doesn't always have a whole lot to do with their ability as an artist, right?
Right.
But it is a part of the job. And I think that, especially within comics, unlike illustration, part of the gig sometimes is to also be a promoter of your work.
Right.
Part of why companies want to hire people is because they have more of an organic reach than those companies do. So, I look at someone like, like Gabriel Piccolo. Are you familiar with
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
work?
Yeah.
Yeah, like he's working on all that Teen Titan stuff, and
Look at his GoFundMe. Or not GoFundMe, Indiegogo. Like
oh
that.
my God, yeah, he's incredible, and he's like the sweetest person. But he is somebody to look at when you're talking about social media and sort of the importance of like organic reach. He's the trifecta, right? Of
Hmm.
like awesome art, very clear direction. He's not aimless. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. Amazing social media reach.
Hmm.
And when DC saw that, like he basically did a trial run for them.
Right.
Like they didn't have to question. There were no concerns about whether or not he would be able to sell Teen Titans because he had already done it.
Hmm.
Um in a lot of ways better than they had.
Well, and
um
really quick, I think the other thing about his stuff that is a little bit different than like, like some of the prints he makes and everything like that. It
mhm.
isn't just like a character doing X.
Yes.
It's storytelling. Like I bought a print.
He
Yeah.
is such an amazing narrative illustrator.
Oh yeah, I bought a print from him at Emerald City this year, and it was, I think the Teen Titans basically at a diner, and like you look through
Yep.
that, and everything is like a conscious decision made from
Yes.
character, and it's brilliant.
Yes, he's incredible and he's so young and he's like I just have nothing but great things to say about him because he's like so nice to everybody and again, just like triple threat, quadruple threat because he's like also got the personality to go with
Right.
it. But yeah, I mean, I'm bringing him up because he is like the prime example of why social media is important, right? Because if you have all of those skills and you're able to like prove to a company that you can sell it, like most of these decisions are just made on like a strictly, for financial reasons.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, if there's less ambiguity about whether or not you'll be able to sell something, like they'll be quicker to hire you. And I think, we talk about the importance of like a portfolio as a job interview. Well, I feel like social media is like the test run, like the trial run of like whether or not you are a person that is safe to hire. Because if you have an amazing body of work and a publisher really wants to work with you and then they go check out your social media and you're like a total asshole on there, that's the interview, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I think that's something to keep in mind too. So it's super, super important. And I kind of hate how important it is because in a lot of ways it feels like the importance of social media forces us to work not one job, but two.
Right.
And it also, it, it's got to have some really bad long-term effects on like our self-worth, you know?
Hmm.
But that being said, it is important and it's undeniable. And, a lot of my own success, I'm sure, is due entirely to the engagement that I have on social media. So it's important. It sucks, but it is.
I do want to bring up something involving, Gabriel, and one of the things that he did to like find success. And honestly, like if you look at other people like Hannah Blumenreich had a lot of success with her Spidey Zine comics,
Hmm.
and that turned into a job with Marvel, when then turned into more success for her, outside of that. You have somebody, I don't remember her name, but there's this one artist who loved Shazam, like an unbelievable,
Oh,
like loved Shazam to the point where she was drawing fan comics for like years
oh my
and
God.
ended up drawing a backup in like the first, I think, couple issues of the new Shazam series that Jeff Johns wrote. And it was
Oh, that's
like,
awesome.
yeah, it's really great. But I mean, the thing is like for a lot of people, like the idea of fan art is kind of a four-letter word in the comic industry. It's just like, oh, you're doing fan art, whatever. But it's like, if I guess in your perspective, do you view fan art as having a place in a professional portfolio?
Yes, but I think it needs to be done very intentionally.
Sure. It can't be the only thing.
Yeah, well, it can't be the only thing, but it also needs to be done in mm, a way that sort of intentionally shows that you can be hired to do it professionally.
Hmm.
there are a lot of fan artists out there, and a lot of them are, God, even more technically inclined than working professionals. They're amazing artists, but they don't always have the same sense of direction or intention that working pros have. And so, when I see someone who has a portfolio full of fan art and it's very good, but I can't really see it being directly applied to anything.
Sure.
I don't know how helpful that is. Like if I see a bunch of fan art and it looks like it could be a cover,
Mm-hmm.
or it looks like it could go on a product, then I'm like, oh, this person must already be working professionally.
Right.
But if I see someone who's just kind of like, it looks like they're doing it for fun and it looks like they're having a good time, that's great. But I don't know that that makes me instantly want to hire them if I'm a publisher, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, but yeah, like even looking at Piccolo's stuff, like he had a narrative, he had like a story that he wanted to tell with it. And even though it was fan art, it had a very clear voice and direction to it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just like he wasn't just drawing like cute little heads of these characters.
Right.
And again, it's like there's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to think about what your goals are,
Sure.
right? And you have to think about what the guy in the suit is looking for.
Yeah.
Because we are all kind of at his mercy.
Yeah. So, well, let's go back to social media just because I want to touch on, my day job is in online social media. And one of the things that a lot of clients of mine struggle with is the fact that there's like a million social networks and all of them have different strengths and all of them have different markets or like different demographics. As far as for an artist, what platforms do you think are the best? And I guess like what are the strengths you view each of them as having?
Yeah. So I definitely think that Twitter and Instagram are at the top of artist social media networks right now.
Right.
Twitter, a little bit more for comic art, and illustration, a little bit more for everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Twitter is king for comics because in comics, I think that personality matters.
Mm-hmm.
Personality matters everywhere, but I think in comics, there's a little bit more, there's a lot more interaction between the end consumer and the creators than there are in any other industry, really. It's honestly, when I think about comics, it's more like the music industry than it is
Mm-hmm.
like other visual arts industries. We are often talking directly to fans. We're interacting with them, and yeah, those walls get more and more broken down every day. So yeah, I think that's why Twitter is sort of at the top for comics.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for everything else and for, if it's illustration or photography or what have you, I do think that Instagram is probably a little bit ahead of Twitter. So I guess if you are somebody who has a fun personality and wants to like engage with people, Twitter is probably going to be the best bet. If you're someone who's a little more shy and like just wants to post art, Instagram probably.
Yeah.
Both of those platforms are terrible when it comes to algorithms.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard for artists who are just starting out today to get noticed on these platforms. And I think such a big part of it is like making content that has more visibility. So whether that's like participating in, artist event hashtags, like, there's so many of them now. God, like yeah. I think there's one that's honestly just like hashtag artists on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's like, visible women, there's so many hashtags. And like anytime one of those events happen, like I always find like 100 new artists to look at, and it's great. I think also like posting fan art and using hashtags, like it's all stuff that we don't really want to do as artists. Like we don't want to have to be like you don't want to look like an advertorial,
Right,
like
right.
covering your posts and hashtags. But I think as far as Instagram goes, it honestly is helpful. And yeah, there are like numerous write-ups online about how to master the Instagram algorithm, but yeah, it's sort of a weird game that has to be played, especially by people who are just starting out now because they don't already have a base who's gonna, see their posts. So that part kind of sucks, but I do think that Twitter and Instagram, regardless of the algorithm, are still sort of top tier for artists.
Yeah.
I think that Tumblr is largely dead. I think it died earlier this year.
Yes.
I think it's breathed its last dying breath. I'm pretty sure.
Hmm.
I think Facebook is also kind of on its way out. It's hard because I think Facebook has been, God, such a source of contention, like especially around the 2016 election, and it's just not most people's favorite place to be on the internet. But the one thing that I will say about Facebook is that it does still have thriving artist communities. There are, there are a ton of smaller communities for like comic artists. There are communities for like Artist Alley at conventions. There's a lot of stuff that you can participate in without looking at like the larger Facebook cesspool.
Yeah.
So I think those are extremely valuable. It also offers like more interaction and like engagement options. So it's not worth it. But I don't personally pay that much attention to my Facebook page. It like my Instagram auto posts to it, and I kind of leave it alone because I'm busy and I don't want to look at Facebook.
Well, and Facebook's complicated because from a sheer volume standpoint, it destroys everyone in terms of like how many people are on there. But the other problem is it also has the most aggressively intense algorithm of them all.
Yes.
And in terms of like if you're a brand page or if you're an artist or whatever, you're going to have tiny reach unless you get lots and lots of engagement on every single post.
Yeah.
So let's tie into one thing that I wanted to ask you really quick before I move on from social media is, everyone has a different approach to this, but do you pre-plan content? Do you have like a view of like how you want to approach that? Or is it still whim based for you?
It's still pretty whim based, which is weird because I feel like, you know, for most people who have gained a larger platform, it tends to be very structured. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty organic and whim based. Another fun fact about doing comic covers is that you don't always know when they're getting released.
I've heard
In
that
fact,
a lot.
yeah, you usually don't know when they're getting released, and you usually don't even have the final art. Usually someone else posts it, and you're like, oh, I guess that's out now. Uh,
I've seen that a lot where people get tagged and they're just like, oh, I didn't know that was
yep,
coming out. Cool.
yep. So a lot of the time, like I can't even plan when I'm gonna post things
Sure.
because I don't know when they're coming out. So yeah, a lot of the time when I post a new piece of art, it's just because like I felt like it or somebody alerted me to it being released.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I do try to be a little bit more structured about though is my actual content.
Mm-hmm.
I think that especially being a larger account, there's a certain level of responsibility that you start to realize that you have once your reach kind of hits a certain point. And so I always try to make sure that I'm not posting anything irresponsible.
Yeah.
And it's not perfect and no one really can be, but in terms of like the content that I put out, I try to make sure that I'm being mindful of how it might be received by the, 120,000 whatever, people who follow me. And so, yeah, that's a big thing. And I've always kind of looked at it sort of as like deposits and withdrawals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we've talked about this before, but my outlook on social media has always been kind of like you would treat a bank. It's always better to make more deposits than withdrawals because you are running a balance with your following. So for me, things that count as deposits are like positive posts, right? So
Hmm.
things that make your followers feel good, whether that's like, funny commentary on something, or whether it's like posting a new piece of art, or, just like saying something nice to someone.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like positive posts. And withdrawals are when you ask for action from your followers or when you add to their stress.
Right.
So if I've made 10 positive posts and then I make one that's like, oh, I'm having a terrible day and like screw this whatever thing that's bothering me, then I probably have the balance to do a withdrawal at that point, right?
Hmm.
But there are accounts that are just like nothing but withdrawals.
Yeah, I mean, it like as somebody who runs a website and has a podcast, one of the tricky things is like you can't just be asking people to click links. I mean, if you have dynamite content all the time, then that's one
Yeah,
thing, but at the same time, it's a lot better for you to seem like a person or to be reflective of a personality. And if you don't have that, it just feels like you're taking all the time. You're with the withdrawals, as you're saying.
exactly. And like, yeah, I think that any audience would get fatigued by that. And I think that, I mean, we've all followed those accounts that like use their Twitter to basically like at, you know, like airplane companies, and they're just like, damn you, Delta, whatever, I'm gonna report you.
I feel really
You're
bad
like,
when I do stuff like that, where it's like,
I do too. I do too. And we've all done it. But if that's all your account is, then like, what are you doing?
I
You
have a
know?
I have a lot of weird stuff about social media where it's like I know enough about social media where I'm just like I feel bad by doing this because weirdly like I feel bad using hashtags and
Yeah, me too.
I just don't do it because I'm just like no, I can't do this. I know why I should do this, but at
I
the same
know.
time it's like for Instagram, I mean, I'm obviously using a completely different like I'm doing it for a different reason than you. Mostly, I'm just like I want to post pictures of my cats because they're super awesome, and that's about that.
Yep.
Different story for you, but
I don't use hashtags on Instagram. I just told everybody listening to go do it, and I don't do it.
well, I mean, the one thing I will say about that though is like hashtags are a discoverability tool. For me,
Yeah.
they're not important because I don't care if anybody discovers it, and for you, you've already been discovered. You're Jen Bartel. We know who you are, so
Uh,
that makes it a little bit easier. But
I like didn't, it's so funny because like the progression of my career has happened so rapidly that I find myself like getting sort of, whiplash from it a lot of the time. And last year I had participated in the Visible Women hashtag,
mm-hmm.
and somebody was like, "Yeah, Jen, we know." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I like kind of didn't realize that was the perception. And
Like
I
this
will
is not for
say,
you.
yeah, kind of. And I will say, I chose not to participate this year for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I don't think that because you have a large following that you should feel like you can't participate in those things. I think that they should be for all women, or for all whatever marginalized group the hashtag is for.
Right.
I just made the decision not to participate because I felt like it was the right thing to do personally,
Sure.
but I'm not saying it to make anyone else feel like they shouldn't. But yeah, it has definitely reached a point where I'm like, oh, I need to, kind of reassess how I operate on these things. And yeah, I do think that an established person is going to behave very differently on social media than someone who's just getting started,
Yeah. Well, let's move on. I briefly want to talk about websites because I like. I feel like to a certain degree, websites for some are just like, what are those? Those are like something old people do. I don't understand that. But you have a website. It's a good one. Do you think having a website is something that all artists should have? Or do you think, I guess, and if you do think that artists should have those, what are the core elements you think you should have on your site?
Yes, have a website,
Yeah.
please. It's it's not that much extra effort. It is more valuable, in my opinion, to have a website than it is to have like an extra social media account. Like, don't have a Tumblr, have a website, or set up your Tumblr so that it is your website,
Yeah. A lot of
Uh,
people did that or used
do
to do that, I
yeah,
guess.
and it's fine. Like honestly, if I, it doesn't matter what platform you're on or what it is, but I think now that I've been in the position where I have actually had to hire artists, designers, colorists, letterers, like, um, it is so helpful when someone has like a concise, clean, streamlined website, clear contact info,
Mm-hmm.
and a link to at least one active social media page. It's like a one-stop shop for everything I need to know about you. Like from a hiring perspective, it basically is just going to make whoever wants to hire you, it's going to make their life a lot easier, if they can go to a one single page that has like your portfolio, some info about you, and your contact info.
Mm-hmm.
That's key. When it comes to portfolio, I think that like somewhere between 10 and 20 pieces is probably the sweet spot. Um, Cycle out old art. You don't need to keep it on there. Like I wouldn't keep anything on your portfolio site that you don't want to get hired to recreate,
Mm-hmm.
because you will get asked.
Yeah.
And your worst piece on your site is going to be the thing that is most representative of you. So keep it concise, keep it just your best pieces, be quick to call, because like if they want to see more, then they can go to your Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
or they can go to whatever other offsite social media you have. Then you can give them more, and you can give them sketches, and you can give them works in progress, and uh, little doodles and whatever. That's fine. But having like a really called down, like best of the best portfolio that gives someone just an immediate bird's eye view of like what you're about, that's so helpful. Because someone told me one time that editors and art directors tend to spend about 30 seconds on a portfolio site before they decide whether they're going to, look further, or whether they're just not going to hire this person.
Yeah.
So if your portfolio is not consumable within 30 seconds, you probably need to call it some more. And I also think that it's best to just like not even bother with like thumbnails,
Mm-hmm.
having like a scrollable, like full page images page
Mm-hmm.
is fine. I think that's why so many people used Tumblr to begin with for their portfolios, because it was easy for art directors to just like pull that up and go scroll through someone's portfolio.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I mean, I do think it's very important, and I do think you should also have social media, but having like a one-stop shop where someone can just get an immediate idea of who you are is so helpful for hiring.
Yeah, and it can route people onto your social presences. So it's like
Yeah.
it's kind of like the hub for everything.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's funny you said the thing about the not having like a piece you're not proud of basically on there.
Yeah.
It reminds me like working for an agency. It's like if you're going to send somebody three pieces, three examples of like what this could be, they will almost universally choose the worst one. And so it's like you don't want to put yourself in a position to be represented by something that you don't want to be represented by.
Always. Oh, and another tip that someone once gave me is when you are choosing the order of images, put your strongest pieces at the beginning and the end,
Oh, sure.
and your like
Good
weaker
first
pieces in
impression,
the
good
middle.
last impression.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
So let's talk about conventions. I do want to, you know, at one point you were probably going to conventions as more of a newcomer. You're now, that's not the case. I know that the perception from about conventions is like that's where a lot of the networking happens. That's where you meet a lot of people that could be giving you jobs. Do you think conventions and networking are like an important thing for somebody who is an aspiring artist today?
Mm, yes, for the most part. I think there are ways around it, but this is, in all honesty, it's kind of like the art school question, right? Yes, it's important. And if you can afford to go, and if you can travel, if you have the time, if you have the means, absolutely, I would recommend it. I think that, like most industries, comics is first and foremost about relationship building. Um, and people want to work with people that they like.
Right.
And the best way to meet, engage with, and get people to like you is to meet them in person.
Yeah.
And to have, food and drinks with them and casual conversation. And it's amazing how many people have gotten opportunities just off of like chance encounters at these things. So yes, I do think it's important, but it also, like the art school thing, we need to recognize as an industry like who has access to these things.
Hmm.
And I do think that, we need to be honest about what that looks like. And I think that publishers need to be honest about that, and they need to be seeking out talent from pools of people who don't always have the means or the ability to get physically to these conventions.
And one other thing I do want to mention is there's also like no silver bullet. It's not like I'm
Yeah,
going to go
yeah.
to New York Comic Con and that will get me a job. It's like
Oh, yeah.
it's
No.
all very situational. I mean, I remember I think it was you who tweeted this, but where you talked about how like so much of finding success in any industry, but really in comics, is like heavily dependent on luck. And it's
Yes.
and like that's not to say you can't put yourself in a position to take advantage of luck, but at the same time, it's like you can't create the perfect alchemy it takes to happen to be in an elevator with the hiring manager for DC Comics or something like that. That's just like this
Yep.
rare thing. So it's like you just have to put yourself out there to a certain degree when you're able to and to the best of your ability.
Yes. 100%. What's that saying? It's luck is the crossroads of preparation and opportunity.
Yeah, I've not heard that, but I like that.
It's 100% true. And yes, like so much of success boils down to luck. And the thing that I actually tweeted, which which caused some contention, was that I am suspicious of anyone who refuses to
Oh,
acknowledge that luck was a part of their success.
yeah.
Because I do think that that is the common thread in everyone who kind of operates by this like bootstrap mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea that we make our own luck. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are a
Fortune
lot
favors the
of,
bold.
right. And you're not wrong, but there are also uncontrollable aspects
Sure.
of a lot of people's lives that just I think that we all need to acknowledge that luck is a part of it. That being said, there are ways to create more opportunities for luck.
Mm-hmm.
I think that going to conventions is a part of that. I think that being outgoing at these conventions is a part of that too, because there's so many people who have come to my table at various conventions, and they've been very shy, and they introduce themselves as an artist, but they don't have a card. They don't have like, they don't really have anything with their art on it for me to look at. I don't always remember them, and it sucks. There are a lot of young artists who come by my table at these things, and I have to ask them to give me a card.
Right.
And I'm like, why are you here? Like you're here to meet people. And there was a colorist who came to my table at Heroes a couple years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and she introduced herself, and she ended up telling me, that she was looking for work, and she very confidently gave me her card,
Mm-hmm.
and I remembered her.
Yeah.
And the next time one of my friends was looking for a colorist, I was like, hey, I checked out this girl's stuff and it was really good. You should look into her. And I wouldn't have done that if she hadn't been so confident and hadn't given me her card and hadn't been memorable,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so a big part of that too is just like having the confidence and, the drive to like go to people and tell them like, hey, this is who I am. And I don't think you need to be pushy about it, because there's definitely like some boundary issues, right? Like you don't want to be that person that goes to a stranger's table because that's what they are, even though, they are funny on social media and maybe they've, interacted with you before. Like you are a stranger to them.
Hmm.
So you don't want to show up at someone's table and be like, hey, can you get me a job?
That's
Like
what I
that's
always lead with when I go to people's tables.
right. Like super, super forward. And maybe it's worked for some, but I think the best way to go about it is to just like casually introduce yourself, say what you do, show people what you do, and leave it at that, and tell them like if you're looking for work, mention it, but don't put pressure on them to become your mom and find you a job. Um, and I also think like a big thing that separated her from a lot of other people is that a lot of young artists, like, I feel like they come to people's tables and they kind of put other creators on a pedestal. And it's weirdly alienating, Like, I think, I think if you're on the other side of it, you think, oh, it must be flattering, to be put on a pedestal. But it just feels strange and awkward most of the time.
Yeah.
And it almost like builds an imaginary wall between you and the creator that you like. And ultimately we're all just people. So I think just treating everyone like a person is the way to go. 'Cause yeah, nothing makes people kind of get awkward faster than just like putting them on a pedestal and making them feel weird.
I've talked to a lot of people, even from an interviewer perspective. It's a lot of people find it like, not a lot of people, but some people have been like, "Oh, how do you like? Do you know all these people before they come on your podcast?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "They're just people. I just talk to them like they're people, and they
Yes.
respond in kind." And it's like that is really important. Like it can be tough. I mean, I understand it. I used to be horribly nervous about
Hmm.
meeting like famous people or people I really respected. Like I have a horror story involving meeting Scottie Pippen, a very famous NBA player, in a restaurant in Portland in which I literally ran away from him.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was terrible. But anyways, but so like everyone's had that time, but at the same time it's like it is something that's important to know is just like everyone is just a person and like they have their own things that are, going on. But I do want to I want to work off that though because it's like let's flip it around. Like when you're tabling for you, like what are some con do's and don'ts for artists tabling at a con because not everyone knows how to handle themselves. Like what are some of the do's and don'ts, whether that's in regards to how you set up your table or your banner or just how you engage with with people who come to your table?
Yeah, I think so so first and foremost, I mean this stuff seems so obvious, right? But like you have to engage with people.
Hmm.
Like, okay, this is like the social media thing because all of us got into this because we just like drawing pictures. And then when you go table at a convention, all of a sudden you're not just an artist, you're also a salesperson.
Right.
And not everybody is inherently good at being a salesperson. And I get that. But you can't be at your table like sitting down with your head down in a sketchbook or in your phone the whole time.
Right.
You have to give good customer service, right? Because ultimately, you are asking people to give you money for things that you made. So you are selling your stuff and they are your customers. And so I think the most important thing is to treat them as such. And yeah, a big part of that is just like, just engaging, and I think there's there's a very big difference between people who are engaging and friendly at conventions versus artists who are like, I've been to conventions where artists have like pressured me to come look at their table and come buy from them. And that's also uncomfortable. So like
Yeah.
don't let the pendulum swing too far the other way either.
Yeah.
But yeah, just be there to answer questions and, don't pressure people to buy from you if they don't want to. Like, just imagine how you would want to be treated at a retail store and do that because that's basically what you are for the weekend. You're
Hmm.
like a mini, like 6x2 retail store.
This is something that came up in a couple conversations at Emerald City this year. What's your stance? Sitting or standing? What do you do when you're tabling?
I don't think it really matters as long as your head's not down,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Like,
As
yeah,
long
I
as you seem like you
stand.
could be engaged with.
Yeah, like I stand if I can, but a lot of the time I end up sitting and it's fine as long as I'm like looking forward and not looking down. And the thing that you don't want is you don't want someone standing at your table for a full 2 minutes before you notice that they're there.
Hmm.
And so whatever you have to do to avoid that. But I do think that if you're standing, you appear a little bit more engaged and it's easier to talk to you because you're at eye level. There are a lot of times where if I'm sitting and a customer is like wanting to have a longer conversation, I will stand
Hmm.
to talk to them because it makes it easier for them. But yeah, I don't think there's like a hard rule on it necessarily. And there's a lot of people who like have, health issues or reasons why
Sure.
they can't stand for long periods of time. So yeah, I don't think we should like hold anyone to any specific standard, but I do think that facing upward and not downward is probably that's the one probably hard rule that I would set.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, and I like, I think largely a lot of the stuff we're looking at it's just there's a different answer for every situation, but as long as you're engaged, it seems like that's the important part. But
Yeah.
last question involving conventions. I think this is another thing that's kind of come up a number of times in the things we're talking about. But it's like, if you don't really have a set idea for what success looks like, you could come out of like your early conventions feeling really bad about your experience.
Yeah.
And that could be really discouraging. Could say, I'm not worthwhile. Maybe I shouldn't do conventions, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think there's a healthy way to set expectations for tabling, both financially and from an experience standpoint?
Mm-hmm. Um, yes. So there are a lot of reasons to table at a convention. And I'm not of the mind that like money is the only reason.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of artists, myself included, who have experienced success selling product, whether that's prints or commissions or other types of merchandise at conventions. But a lot of my biggest gains from doing conventions have come just from meeting people
Mm-hmm.
and from developing relationships that have later turned into actual jobs. So I think first and foremost, like, don't be totally discouraged if you don't end up making what you had hoped to make.
Mm-hmm.
But um, I do think that there are certain things that people can do and sort of consider when they're building out what they're going to bring to a convention. And so um, this I guess this kind of falls back into what you were asking earlier about like sort of best practices, but you know, just know that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And
Mm-hmm.
so there are a lot of people who, take a few years to build up enough of an offering and enough of a fan base in order to start turning a profit. Um, it's it's kind of an investment for long-term gain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and another thing that like it's so hard when you're first getting started, but you know, the level of investment that you do for tabling at one convention is sort of similar to like what you would invest even if you were doing 3 or 4 or 5 conventions that year, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
like you're going to buy one banner regardless. You're going to buy one tablecloth regardless. You're going to buy one set of displayers. If you're a person who sells like enamel pins or prints or whatever, uh, doing more conventions means that you can probably order more product, which means that the cost per item
Mm-hmm.
that you are paying is going to be lower. So it kind of benefits you to do more than one show per
Yeah.
year. And so that's another thing to keep in mind. Uh, and yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ways that you can cut down on convention costs by like, sharing room and board, splitting tables, things like that. And I think a lot of that has been talked about, but one thing that I don't always see people talking about is like the actual merchandising aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's just because I came from a product dev background, but I've always sort of considered like profit margins and pricing structure. I've thought about that stuff a lot, and I don't always see everyone going into it with like a solid game plan, you know?
Hmm.
And so I guess one thing that I would talk about is, okay, so like, if I were setting up a table at a convention for the first time, I would be asking myself, in terms of merchandising and like visual display, right?
Hmm.
Can someone walking by look at my table and understand what I'm about in just a couple of seconds?
Right.
Like, that's so important, right? So you need to have a setup that is very clear, clearly labeled, clearly visible. People aren't going to like, when Artist Alley is fully packed and people are doing kind of the shuffle to get through it, they're not going to like mosey on and wait and try to check everything at your table before moving on to the next. You kind of have to, they have to be able to see what you're offering in just a couple seconds.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like what we were talking about with the website, like you have to have it called down to a place where it's very easy to tell what you're about and what you're offering. And sometimes what that means is that less is actually more. I see a lot of artists at these things with like gigantor displays of like 100 prints.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know that anyone can tell what any of that is. Like sometimes it's better to kind of like narrow down what you want to offer. And then that way you're also like making less of an initial investment too. And I know that there's like the temptation to just do all of the things, right? Because you're like, I got to sell all of the things.
Yeah.
But depending on how your pricing is structured and how many formats and themes you have, some of those things might just be cannibalizing your other things anyway.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've always thought of my offering in terms of like seasons, which again is probably a thing that comes from product. um, but yeah, I have refreshed my offering, several times throughout the year, and I usually whatever I'm offering is done at the end of the year, so people know that they can kind of only get it then. Um, I think a lot about having something at every price point,
Yeah.
which I think is really important because, like you don't want to have a table full of $10 items and you don't want to have a table full of $50 items.
Hmm.
You want to have a solid variety in your offering so that people have something that they can get at any price point. And when I talk about formats and themes, what I'm saying is, you also don't want to have a table that's all just one thing,
Yeah.
right? It's nice to have like a mix if you're an artist that's trying to do merchandise. If you're an artist that's just doing like commissions and selling your books, don't worry about this.
Hmm.
But if you are someone who wants to offer like pins and patches and keychains and a lot of the things that I do, one thing to really consider is like how many formats do you have at your table and how many of them are directly related to each other or have the potential to make someone choose,
Hmm.
right? So, like, if I have a rainbow pin and a rainbow patch and a rainbow sticker, how many people are going to buy all three of those?
Right.
And how many people are just going to get the sticker because it's the cheapest, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I've always tried to be very conscious about like what designs I'm offering on what formats. And I think, one mistake, and I don't even know that it's actually a mistake because it might work just fine for a lot of people who are doing it. But for me personally, it has always resulted in cannibalization and people choosing. So I have largely avoided offering the same design across multiple formats.
Hmm.
And people don't always like that because sometimes people are like, oh, I wish this patch was a pin or
Right.
vice versa. But ultimately, it has served me best to kind of limit the number of formats that each design gets because it also makes them feel more special. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Other than that, like, it's really just, God, it's so case by case that I feel like really you kind of have to be prepared to do your first convention and take away everything that you can possibly learn from it for your personal offering and your personal experience, and then get it better the second time, you know?
Yeah.
That's certainly what I did. And so, yeah, even this advice that I'm giving, it's not going to apply to everyone, and it's only going to stretch so far, you know? You kind of have to be willing to do your first convention at a loss or at the potential of a loss.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Like, not everyone can do that.
No, no. I mean, and it's a lot of people don't go in with the expectation that that's going to happen. I do want
Yeah.
to one thing I want to add in, and you touched on this, but like for a lot of times, like somebody like me, I'm coming from Alaska, and I get to go to one convention a year. That's really all I do, and it's like sometimes I'll meet somebody like a creator, and they just probably are having a bad day, but I happen to have a
Mhm.
really bad experience with them, and it's like that always puts something in my head of like I don't know if I want to buy this person's comics anymore. And
Totally.
it's a it's kind of a petty thing perhaps, but at the same time it's like that interaction will always like that interaction you have with somebody will always live with that person you have that interaction with, and it's hard to change a very negative experience. I've had that happen, and it's tricky. It's like, it was somebody whose work I really liked, and after that I was just like, I don't know, this is tough. Like, what do I do now? And I don't know. I mean, and so I guess what I'm saying is people have to be conscientious of how you're engaging with somebody, because you never know who that person is, or
Yeah.
like whether or not they're gonna that this interaction will color how they look at you from now on.
I know. And it's so hard, right? Because like we're
Your people.
we are people, but we're also like very poorly socialized people. We're
Yeah, you have to
like
sit
we're
in a room
all
all the time by yourself.
yeah, yeah, all of us are like weirdos who like work in total isolation for like long periods of time in between talking to other humans. And we're not like the most fit for being a customer service and salesperson for a weekend
Hmm.
every now and then, you know? But that is what you sign up to do when you go to table at a convention. And I know it sounds harsh, but if you give somebody a bad experience, that's on you, you know? Like, you're the creator, you're there tabling. Like, y- if you want people to buy your stuff, you got to be nice to them.
Right.
Um, and yeah, like, I understand that we all have bad days, but take a break. Like, get off the floor for a while, do what you got to do, shut your table down, whatever, you know? But it sucks to hear that that's a thing that happens. And, I'm sure I've inadvertently done it too. And, sometimes those things are unavoidable, but
Yeah.
it's kind of our job for that weekend to be on. And that's why it's so tiring, you know?
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't really understand like the mentality of somebody who goes and tables at a convention and then is just rude to people, you know? So I don't think it's petty. I don't think that it's wrong for you to like, if you have a bad experience with a creator, of course you don't want to support them anymore, you know? And I think that creators should be mindful of that.
Yeah. I gotta just tout somebody really quick. So this year at Emerald City Comic Con, Rob Liefeld was there. And
Yeah.
when I walked by his table every single time, like he was in this special place that was near the escalators near
Yep.
Artist Alley. Every time I walked by and he was engaging with a fan, it seemed like it was like the happiest moment of his life.
Yep.
And it like that, I guarantee you, plays a huge part in why people continue to love him,
Totally.
well past, I mean, I don't want to say well past his prime, but past his peak, like, because he was
Yes,
like
yes,
the most popular artist in comics during one of the most
totally.
popular times in comics, and he just seemed like he had so much joy meeting people, and that
Yeah.
even as an outsider, I was just like, he just seems like a good guy. So yeah.
Listen, 100%. I mean, I have sat like two tables away from Rob at shows before, and it's not an act, you know? Like people like to make fun of how that guy like draws feet or doesn't draw feet or whatever it is, but he is like the nicest person. And he is just like he's so excellent to fans, and I think that is a huge commonality in the people who are most successful at these things and who have the longest running careers, you know?
Yeah, everyone will
Um,
remember like Rob Liefeld treating them like his best friend.
Yeah. I was at WonderCon this year, and I was seated just a row away from where Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo were doing a signing, and they stayed an extra hour and a half to make sure that everybody got the interaction that they deserved. And, I mean, they're like busy people with very limited time. I think Scott just had a baby.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think it's truly what separates like the pros who have long-term careers from the people who might not be around so long.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds harsh, but ultimately, if you don't feel confident that you can have good interactions with people throughout a weekend, don't do cons.
Yeah.
Like, just don't, because it will do damage.
Yeah, I got to share a really quick Greg Capullo story just because it always entertains me. I was at New York Comic Con, and my buddy and I were rolling through our hotel's lobby, and we leave this escalator, and like a deluge of people comes in because it's like the end of the day, and everyone's going in. And my buddy and I used to host a show together, and all of a sudden we hear this booming voice, and it's like, hey, and we're like, what the hell? And we turn around, and it's like, there's this guy, and he looks like, we're like, oh my god, this guy clearly wants to fight. He's like a biker, and he's gonna kill us. And he's like, you guys are the guys from the YouTube. And we're like, oh my god, somebody hates us, this is gonna be bad. And he points at my friend, he's like, I'm Greg Capullo, and I just want to tell you that I really appreciate your support. And he shakes my friend's hand, and like he like points at me afterwards, and he's like, and you're coming around too, because I was like slightly down on him and Scott's like Batman book at the time. But it was
Oh
funny
my
because
God.
he like remembered us. He like
Yeah.
made when I was way to like say hello, and he actually remembered our actual preferences. And it was just
Yeah.
really funny because like after that, my buddy and I were like floating, and we're also just like, we will fight to the ends of the earth for Greg Capullo. This guy is a
Listen,
god.
yeah, I was on a panel with him at WonderCon, and yeah, I mean, truly, it's like again, I think there are a lot of people online that will say all sorts of things about, established pros who have been in this industry for a long time, and maybe like some of the newer people don't quite understand why these people have had such long-standing successful careers, and they need to just meet them
Yeah,
is the answer,
yeah,
truly,
yeah,
because there is a different kind of conduct. Um, and yeah, all you need to do is like meet one of them, and it becomes instantly clear why they are so successful and why they have had such long-standing careers.
yeah. Well, let's close with our last subject, which is about the work itself. And I want to
Yeah.
do it through the prism of Blackbird, which just saw its first collection drop. Um, Before we get into specifics about putting the work together, I wanted to ask about some of the background things that people don't always talk about. I'm sure you and Blackbird's writer Sam Humphries and the rest of the team talked about a whole lot and how you wanted to approach the series and what the plan for it was and everything before you ever got started. I mean, it's good to be on the same page. When you're starting a new project with a team, what do you have to make sure you have settled with your collaborators ahead of time?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of stuff that I wish that I had known before getting into doing my first creator-owned book, and thankfully, I have been very, very lucky with a great team and with great collaborators thus far. But there's a lot of stuff that like you kind of just can't find information on online, and so I think just first and foremost, everyone should know that when you commit to doing a creator-owned book with a collaborator, you are entering into a work marriage
Yeah.
and you are creating a baby together. And just be aware of that because it's a lot. Like this is a person that you are going to be working with long term. You really want to make sure that you have all of the details of like the contract, the payment, like all of that stuff hashed out ahead of time so that you're not discussing it when you're working on story. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think just like hashing out all of the like potentially uncomfortable conversation stuff ahead of time is probably the best course of action. And that's what Sam and I did, you know?
Hmm.
We just nailed out like all of the potentially uncomfortable conversation so that once that was all out of the way, we could just like focus on the book. And I would highly recommend that to anyone because the last thing you want is you're like working on issue 3 and you're like, oh, hey, How do you feel about whose name should be credited first?
Hmm.
Like you don't really want to be having those types of conversations when you're like halfway into drawing the book.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think just talking about everything ahead of time is probably the best bet, and also just knowing kind of like what your options are, what sorts of deals are out there. I don't know how far into specifics you want to get on the podcast, but in terms of like creator owned books, there are lots of different options between like, a publisher like Image, where creators retain full ownership and rights to their work, but oftentimes are not paid in advance or any kind of, they basically don't have any kind of like guidance or safety net beyond helping you get the book into retailers,
Right.
into comic shops. You're basically doing it with little to no handholding and little to no financial support.
Hmm.
And if you can swing that, you get the best deal in the industry. But if you can't, most other publishers also offer creator owned deals. And they will vary quite a bit, but I think that most publishers have kind of a like sort of 50-50 ownership standpoint. At least
Hmm.
that's where the negotiations tend to begin. I don't know where they all end up. But I know that like that's how Dark Horse handles it. I'm pretty sure that's how Oni handles it. That's how IDW handles it. And God, who else? I think I also think that's how Vertigo handles it. Um,
Yeah,
God.
I don't know about the new Vertigo deal. I mean,
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
I heard that there was a slight difference now,
Okay.
but I could be mistaken. I mean, that's the thing is we were talking about this before we start recording is like a lot of these things are unknown because nobody talks about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like it makes it kind of tricky because you're just like, am I getting a good deal? I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, I think my number one advice to anyone signing on to work on a creator owned book would be to seriously, seriously consider getting an agent. Um, they are worth their weight in gold.
Hmm.
I cannot imagine navigating a book deal without an agent,
Yeah.
especially within the book market. Maybe you could swing it in the direct market like comics, But even then, I think having an agent in your corner is everything. And, you know, it's just, yeah, I look at it as a necessity personally. Because I think just having someone in your corner and having someone do those like negotiations for you allows you to start doing the work on a much better foot, I think.
Hmm.
Because if you, as the creator, have just spent the last like 4 months negotiating your own rate,
Yeah.
I've seen it happen to other people that I know. Like, you start a project and you already feel undervalued,
Yeah. Well, and you also
you know?
probably like lose a ton of your enthusiasm in the process.
Yeah.
And then the other thing,
Yeah.
I imagine the other thing with the agent too is because if they work in comics semi often, they'll
Hmm.
probably have a little bit more context about what other deals look like. And so they might be able to offer something that you yourself don't know.
Yeah. And on top of that, like, they just know everybody. So, like, they're, I've heard stories of people who have, their agents have gotten like publishers into bidding wars over their books. Like, it's just that's not something that you're really going to accomplish on your own as a creator. And it's also like something that really truly takes away from you making the work.
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't know if people are interested, but I'm personally represented by Charlie Olson at Inkwell Management, and I know that Inkwell, they handle a lot of different comic creators. Um, I don't know a ton of other agents off the top of my head, but I know that there are like three or four really prominent ones that represent like the majority of comics.
Yeah.
Um, God, what's her name?
If it was lawyers, I could help. I actually
I
know
know, right?
several of the lawyers in comics, but I don't know any of the agents actually.
I'm gonna have to look it up. I'm sorry.
No, it's
I
okay.
should have known this ahead of time.
It's okay. I mean, honestly, I could always add it to the post. Um,
Yeah, but there are, there are not a ton of agents that are like looking to take on, comic creators. Usually they're like representing novel writers or like
right.
Hollywood people. But yeah, the ones that are working with comic creators are amazing. And yeah, I mean, if you can swing it, I just highly recommend looking into getting an agent. And I know it's a stereotype, but like most of us are pretty bad at negotiating anyway.
Mhm.
And so much of our self-worth is like tied into that. So, yeah, when it comes to doing creator-owned books, like if you can have someone in your corner kind of negotiating on your behalf, that's the way to do it, in my opinion.
Sure. Well, let's talk about another thing that not everybody gets on creator-owned books, and that's an editor. Your editor on
Mm.
Blackbird is Jim Gibbons, the Portland Trailblazers' #1 fan, who is probably having a tough night because his team is playing the Golden State Warriors tonight. Uh, but anyways, not every book, not every creator-owned book, especially an Image, has an editor. How important has Jim been to make sure all of your trains arrive on time, so to speak?
We delivered every issue of Blackbird on time, and that would not have happened without Jim.
That's awesome.
Point blank.
I'm in a basketball DM thread with him where we talk about
Oh,
it on
funny.
Twitter, so I will make sure to compliment him on his ability to make sure deadlines are hit.
He is incredible. And actually, I don't know if maybe I mentioned this the last time I was on, but Jim is the first person who ever gave me an opportunity in comics.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, sorry.
Oh, was this
Um,
when he was at Stila?
yes,
Okay.
sorry. He's the first person who ever gave me a comic, like a book
Hmm.
opportunity in comics. The first people who ever took notice of me were Kelly Thompson and John Barber, who were the people who kind of made my cover run on Gem and the Holograms happen.
Hmm.
But as far as like actual creator-owned storytelling, Jim Gibbons is the person who took a chance on me when he was at Stila, and he offered a opportunity to me where I was able to do a little short creator-owned thing that actually is now at Dark Horse in trade paperback form, called Crystal Fighters.
Hmm.
And that was like the first thing that I ever did interior-wise. And in a weird way, I kind of have Jim to blame for my like now Stockholm syndrome.
Thanks,
So it's his
Jim.
fault. But yeah, it was really great to be able to like, a couple years later turn around and say like, hey, can I hire you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he is fantastic. He is just an incredible editor. He makes the story better and he makes everything run on time. And yeah, I can't say enough good things about Jim.
That's awesome. All right, just a couple more questions. I do want to ask about, you alluded to the hermit nature of artists to a certain degree earlier, and interior art is arduous and it's time consuming and it can be laborious and et cetera, et cetera. And it's something that really benefits from smart scheduling. Like one of my favorite people in comics is Rob Guillory, who's the guy who does Farmhand at Image, and he
Hmm.
is, in my opinion, the god of scheduling. He is like, that is like his superpower. Not every artist has that. What is your average day like when you're working on interiors on Blackbird?
Hmm. Okay, in all seriousness, yeah, drawing comics is hard.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really hard, and a lot of the time it has turned me into sort of like an unwilling night owl.
Sure.
Um,
I do have to admit that you sent me an email last night, and I was in bed in Alaska, and I was just like, oh, okay then, okay.
yeah. You can always tell when I'm crunching, when I'm on a deadline crunch because my emails start coming in like closer and closer and closer to 5 a.m. But yeah, it definitely there are inevitable crunch periods that happen if you are trying to get a book out on time because It can take a writer 3 seconds to write crowd scene,
Yeah.
and it takes me an additional 3 days to draw it. But that being said, I usually shoot for an average of about 2 pages a day. If I can hit that, that's a good day. Um,
That is a good day.
some days it's going to be 1 page because that page was more complex. Some days it's going to be 3 pages because I just had to do a bunch of talking heads. So it kind of varies, and I think work-wise you have to be able to flex for that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, when you're really in the thick of drawing a comic, there's long hours and it's labor intensive, and there's a reason that a lot of people get burnt out and it's not sustainable for everyone, you
Hmm.
know? I also think that there's a lot to be said about, kind of industry standards for how quickly people expect these things to be pumped out.
Right.
But that's another conversation. uh, you know, just my typical day is, I have the goal of getting 2 pages done,
Yeah.
and that's my North Star.
So I brought up this idea over email, and you kind of basically laughed over the internet when I suggested the idea of like a work-life balance and like finding time for yourself. But do you try to like build in rewards into your schedule of like, if I do this, I
Yeah.
can play with my dogs?
Well, so the dog stuff is non-negotiable for
Okay.
me.
Okay.
Like the dog stuff, my dogs are the only reason why I will take structured breaks, honestly,
Sure.
because they deserve it,
Hmm.
and they're gonna get what they deserve, regardless of what's due.
That
Um,
sounds ominous in a weird way.
they deserve the best.
Okay. Good.
Um, and yeah, I have never, I'm not gonna like compromise on, making sure my dogs are like fulfilled, so that I can get a comic book drawn a little bit faster because my dogs are more important than any comic book. Point blank. But, I should stretch more, and I should probably not work till 4 or 5 a.m. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I do that I should totally not do. And yeah, um, I do try to build in rewards when I'm in a very bad crunch period, which I actually just got out of one recently. Uh, usually those rewards are more like retail therapy,
Hmm.
which is like you can tell like how much of a deadline crunch I'm in by like my credit card transaction.
Hmm.
It's bad. Um, but yeah,
Minor meal based.
oh my God, yes, that too. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna eat everything.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I launched a new sketch yesterday. I'm gonna go and eat all of the Mexican food.
Yes, congrats on that, by the way. That was
Thank you,
awesome.
thank you.
But yeah, it's hard. It's like a continuous struggle, and I think even with creator-owned stuff, like you still have deadlines, and you still want to make sure that everything is getting out there on time, and that the retailers are happy and the fans are happy, and sometimes I think that at the end of the day, all of us need to just like take a step back and realize like this is comics. Like
Right.
it's not that serious. you know? Like it's not worth like slowly killing ourselves over,
Yeah.
probably. So yeah, it's a thing that I personally am like trying to get better about, but man, sometimes, when there's deadlines, um I don't think I would worry about it as much if I was the last person on the factory line.
Hmm.
But because like any lateness that I experience is only going to trickle down onto like Triona, onto, like every single person who has to touch the pages after I do is
Your
affected.
crunch is gonna crunch them.
Right. And so I think that's the driving force behind me not wanting to be late with anything is that I know how it can affect other people. And I think if that wasn't there, I wouldn't worry about it as much.
Hmm.
But yeah, having other team members that you care about and you don't want them to be stuck pulling all-nighters, having to get things in on deadline. Yeah, it just makes you work a little bit more than you probably should.
Yeah. Well, let's close with a broader question about where if you're an artist, you exist within a larger comic marketplace. I mean, it's like there's the direct market, which is comic shops. There's the book market, bookstores, digital comics, Kickstarters, self-publishing, et cetera, et cetera. It's all a large ecosystem. It's a lot to consider when it comes to where your work fits in this larger marketplace because it's not existing in a vacuum. Do you think it's important for comic artists to pay attention to the industry, especially as they're putting a new project together?
Yes. I think, okay. I think that there is like a natural sort of trepidation. There's kind of a resistance among a lot of creative people to be business people. Yeah. Because when you think business person, you think of like a boring person in a suit who like doesn't make creative decisions and is like kind of soulless, right? Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is, like, we are all businesses. The IRS certainly treats us as businesses. Mm-hmm. We certainly pay more in taxes because we are considered small businesses. And so why we don't view ourselves as businesses is kind of a mystery to me.
Right.
Yeah, I think that we need to stop treating that like it's some kind of dirty word or like like we shouldn't be in it to run a successful business. Mm-hmm. 'Cause that's such a huge part of it. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I think that, it would be a shame if you were successful at running a business and then you closed the door behind you. Like, mm-hmm. That would be a shame. But being a successful person, like that, in my opinion, just like opens more doors for other people, mm-hmm. Especially if you are making sure to keep those doors open and to invite people in with you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that if you're a creator and you are not, at least attempting some level of business savvy, and if you aren't keeping track of what's going on within the industry, in a big picture sense, you're not only doing yourself a disservice, but kind of everyone else a disservice too. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we work within an industry that, how many times have I been offered jobs because like prefaced with how cool it would be, how much of an honor it is to like work on these nerdy things that so many people would love to work on, mm-hmm. And it's true. There are plenty of people out there who would gladly do my job for free, but that doesn't mean that any of us should do it for free.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't still treat it as a job. Like, don't get me wrong. Of course it's a privilege and of course it's cool, but it's still work and it's still labor and it's still business.
Yeah. You have to value yourself.
Yeah. So I think that, when creators kind of take on the attitude of like, well, I'm an artiste and like, I don't want to think about all that stuff. I just want to like create the art. I think it's a disservice.
Sure.
To the industry as a whole. And I also think that because so much of the comics industry specifically has like we all have such a symbiotic relationship with each other, Mm-hmm. Like, especially if you think about like the creator retailer dynamic within the direct market. Mm-hmm. I talked about this recently, and I was like kind of surprised at how many people didn't realize this, but like, retailers often request variant cover artists.
Yeah.
Like,
well, they have like store specific variants from time to time, quite often actually.
Yeah, it's a huge reason why some variant artists get offered more jobs. Mm-hmm. It's because certain retailers either personally like them, have an easier time selling them in their store, or both, Mm-hmm. And vice versa. Like, we as creators, we rely on these retailers to sell our books for us. And so I think more than any other industry within visual arts, like it's so symbiotic. And I think that if you are a creator who is like turning a blind eye to industry standards and like what's going on, in the larger picture, and like, how are you doing your job?
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, I mean, and I will say that like, to a certain degree, you're a little bit rare in that. I mean, I saw you at Comics Pro, the Comics Pro's annual meeting in Portland a year and a half ago, and like that's not something a lot of artists go to. But at the same time, it's like that is an important place to like if you're rolling out a book like Blackbird, it's a really important place to like really get in front of people and get in front of the right people and everything like that. And that's not to say that everybody's got to go to Comics Pro's annual meeting by any means, but it is
No,
like,
it's not.
I mean, in like going to what you're saying about how like the artiste thing, it's like, it's all about finding a balance, right? It's like, you know, you can go too far on the business side too. It's like if you lose touch with the craft or the art or why you're doing this to begin with, and it's just a mercenary thing, then you probably, there's a soullessness to it.
Totally. And I think, and ultimately that's why like that sort of stereotype exists, you know, and I think that that's why so many creative people are afraid of like, you know, getting too deep into like the business side of it.
Sure.
But I mean, ultimately, like, I don't know. So many things about this industry have like kind of convinced a huge group of people that like they should be happy with table scraps.
Mm-hmm.
And it's simply not true. You know, it's a myth. And I think that the people who are doing the people who have the most stable careers are the ones who have really paid a lot of attention to the industry and business side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't ignored their craft and they haven't lost their souls, but they are also very conscious of, you know, what kinds of decisions they make. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's hugely important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of this is important. Jen, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about, you know, what it takes to be an artist in 2019. And, you know, honestly, like if you listen to this podcast and you want to hear more, let us know. And maybe we'll follow up with some, you know, questions in text form or some answers in text form, things like that. But Jen, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this with me.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with artist Jen Bartel. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram at HeyJenBartel, on her website at jenbartel.com, and her work in Blackbird at Image Comics. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show on there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to exclusive written and audio content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating and review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel on social media by liking it on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTCHD, following it on Twitter at SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Litwin Studios, Alex Dimitropoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Liana Kangas, Keegan Ray, Milton Lawson, Wesley Gift, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Gus, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Connor Farner, Vita Ayala, JDC and Matt Gagnon, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, Kieran Mark Antonio, WMQ Comics, Akil, Greg Lockard, Kokachi, Phil White, Ben Becker, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Maria Schweitzer and Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Evan Blazer, Brian McRae, Iron James Udaskin, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Phil Null, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Carl McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. Quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening and tune in next week for another episode.